How much is my case worth? That is a question that we might get more than any other question. Some of you may have already asked that question at this stage, and you'll remember what we told you. And here's what it is. And it's a fair question. I'll give you that. However, for those of you that have already asked that question, you know what my response is. We don't answer that question at this stage. And that's because if a lawyer tells you what your case is worth this early in a case, I'm going to be blunt. They are lying to you. And that's because we have very little information at this stage. We have the information that you've given us, and we believe you. We believe the information that you've given us. However, there's a lot of other information that we need to pursue your case. We need information on liability. They might be trying to make a claim. They might try to make a claim that you're partially at fault. If you are partially at fault, that will bring the value of the case down. A lot of other information pertains to your treatment and the extent of your injuries. And you may not even know at this point how seriously injured you might be. We've had several clients that thought that they were okay at this stage, and then a few months later are needing neck and back surgery. I'm not trying to scare you, but that's just how big of a difference it could be when it comes to the value of the case. And you'll know that by getting MRIs and imaging and all that to figure out the extent of your injuries. But at this point, we don't have that information. Once we start to get your medical records and bills, and once we have a chance to talk to your doctors, once we know about liability and if you've got any lost wage information and the policy limits that apply to your case, once we have that information, we'll be able to give you a range of what we think the case is worth. We're usually pretty accurate when it comes to the range of what we think a case is worth. But here's the reality is, you might disagree with it. You might think the case is worth more. Usually the client thinks that the case is worth less. And that's where we have to sort of step in and say, you don't need to accept that offer. That offer is way too low. We think we can get you a lot more money. This is a sort of a process where we figure out along the way, as we get information, as we get additional evidence, then we're able to determine what your case is worth, or the value of your case. But ultimately, who decides that is you. That's the reality. You get to decide whether or not you believe that the offer that they make is worth it. Ultimately, that's what it is. There's some other realities that we talk about in other videos, that the reality is sometimes a case is only worth what the policy limits are at the time, because that's all that the defendant would have. We will sometimes talk about throwing good money after bad money. And I'll give you that situation. Let's say that the policy limit's $25,000, but you've got really significant injuries. Well, if the defendant has no money, the most the case is worth is $25,000. Let me give you the flip side of that. Let's say that the insurance company commits bad faith, and we talk about bad faith quite a bit. You're probably going to hear that term, and I explain that in other videos, so I'm not going to talk about it here. That case that we thought maybe worth $25,000 could be worth $300,000, and it really just depends as the evidence comes in. All that to say is, we don't answer that question at this stage. It's just too early. At some point, we'll be able to give you a range, but at this point, it's just too early. So we ask that you please be patient. It's okay if you ask the question, but just understand that we're not going to be able to give you an answer at this stage.